it not only impacts the Palestinians, which I know you couldn't care less about, but it also obviously is going to impact the hostages. They're going to starve to death as well.
You're saying Israel is starving the hostages?
I'm saying, yes, yeah. When you block humanitarian aid for 3 months, where do you think they're going to get the food from?
Max, Israel...
What a joke.
Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks went on Abby Phillips' show on CNN to engage in a heated debate with far-right commentator Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings, of course, smirked his way through a series of MAGA talking points. We're going to take a look at these clips on Abby Phillips' show of Anna Kasparian and Scott Jennings. I will share my thoughts on this as well. Let's get into it together.
Tonight, outrage grows as Israel's actions push it to the brink of isolation. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis took to the streets today, demanding a hostage deal and a ceasefire with Gaza in a nationwide show of force. Now, the protests come after back-to-back Israeli strikes on Gaza's largest remaining hospital that killed at least 20 people on Monday. Among them, 5 Palestinian journalists who worked for various outlets, including the Associated Press and Reuters. Now, the Israeli military claimed, without providing evidence, that the double-tap strike, as it's called, was aimed at what it believed was a camera positioned by Hamas to observe IDF activity. A security source told CNN that none of the journalists killed on Monday were targets. Meanwhile, the Palestinian people's suffering is deepening. Famine is declared for the first time in Gaza. Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is Max Boot. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a Washington Post columnist. And Max, this is just a continuation of almost a snowball effect, as the war has been being carried out, I think, like this for some time now. But the combination of the targeting of journalists and also the backlash inside Israel and outside of Israel is starting to worry a lot of people who are pro-Israel, by the way.
Yeah, including me. I mean, I'm a strong supporter of Israel, but I'm very concerned about what I'm seeing that the Netanyahu government is doing in Gaza, because if you listen to what the IDF, the Israeli generals themselves, said about a year ago, was they had concluded their military objectives in Gaza. Hamas was no longer a threat to Israel, and so they were basically saying there was not much more that the Israeli military could do in Gaza, and yet the offensive continues, because for Netanyahu to turn off the war would be very politically perilous, because he is really at the mercy of the far-right parties in his own coalition. And so he keeps on fighting, even though the cost is growing, not just to Palestinians, but also to Israelis, because remember, there are a lot of Israeli soldiers who are on the front lines as well. So to my mind, this is a terrible tragedy, not only primarily, of course, humanitarian tragedy for the people of Gaza, but it's really a long-term tragedy for the state of Israel. I was just looking at a poll that showed, Gallup showed that only 30% of Americans now support the war that Israel is waging in Gaza. This is going to cause an entire generation of Americans in countries around the world to turn against the Jewish state. And as somebody, again, who supports the Jewish state and stands with the Israelis who are out there protesting against the war, what Netanyahu is doing is horribly destructive, not only for Gaza, but also for Israel.
I would agree with that. And, you know, I don't believe for a second that those journalists were not targeted. I think journalists are being targeted in Gaza. They're not allowing international journalists to report on the ground, to enter the Gaza Strip, unless, of course, they're being accompanied by IDF soldiers. And hundreds of journalists have been slaughtered in Gaza. Every single time it happens, Netanyahu comes out and says, oh, it was a mishap. And the United States just forgets about it and moves on, continues providing more bombs. Thank you for saying what you're saying, because you are correct that people are losing their support for Israel over the conduct of, I don't consider this a war at all. I do consider it a genocide. When you have humanitarian aid workers being slaughtered, when you have every single hospital bombed, when you have the entire Gaza Strip leveled, that's not a war. A war, if you do targeted strikes and you go after the combatants. 729 magazine, an Israeli publication, obtained IDF documents showing, their data shows that 83% of the people slaughtered in Gaza are civilians. 83%. Let me say it again, 83%. How are you going to call that a war against Hamas?
This latest attack.
And as Anna Kasparian is saying these words and saying that's not a war, which she's 100% right, you have Scott Jennings here just smirking and smiling and laughing and mugging for the camera, which is what he does every night on Abby Phillips' show. And I don't know how, you know, if these are his true beliefs or he just knows that he's paid to be the villain on CNN, but I can't imagine anyone honestly having these beliefs and being able to sleep at night. To be on national television in the United States, like Scott Jennings is, defending what Israel is doing. And when Max Boot there talks about that only 30% of Americans support what Israel is doing, I'm amazed that the number is that high, to be honest, that even 30% do. But you have the politicians in our country have a real problem now because, you know, the Republicans have been all in for Israel for my entire lifetime. And really most of the Democrats have as well. But you have Donald Trump and MAGA who pretend that they are the anti-war party, the anti-war group. And of course, Donald Trump is going along with everything that Netanyahu is doing. But the Democratic politicians are facing a real problem because you have the majority of their party that do not support what is going on in Israel, and they don't buy the threading of the needle that politicians like Pete Buttigieg are trying to do, where they're saying, well, you know, we're going to continue to give them weapons, but we only want to give them defensive weapons. And if they're offensive weapons, then, you know, maybe we don't agree with that, blah, blah, blah. And voters are saying, don't give them any more weapons at all. Don't give them any more money at all. And as an American voter, it gets to the point of who the hell do you vote for? When you have both parties, their establishment are all in for Israel, and the vast majority of the people in the country are saying, no, we do not support this, do not continue giving them money. And these guys like Scott Jennings are way in the minority in supporting Israel. Where do you turn as a voter?
That killed the 5 journalists. The story is that there was a camera that was operated by Hamas. I'm going to play what Barak Ravid, who's perhaps one of the best sourced reporters in both the United States and Israel on this story. This is what he said last night about that story.
At least from what I hear from some Israeli officials, there are serious questions about this version. And it is not at all clear that this was indeed an approved target. Whether it was a Hamas reconnaissance outpost in the hospital or not, there has been a lot of arguments between the general staff in the IDF headquarters and the Southern Command regarding targeting.
So Israeli officials said that the journalists were not the targets, but they were in fact killed. They also said that there were terrorists who were in the group of 20 that were killed. Mm-hmm. But this is the type of thing that has caused the world to ask very serious questions about how they are conducting this war. That they would, if you take this story at face value, bomb a camera, kill 20 people as collateral, and then say, as Netanyahu said in a statement today, that this was a tragic mishap.
Yeah, I think they said also 6 terrorists were killed in the attack.
Total BS.
We've heard, how do you know?
I know it's BS because of the IDF's internal documents, which indicate that 83% of the people killed there happen to be civilians.
That there weren't any terrorists?
I'm not going to sit here and regurgitate the lies from the Israeli government as they're conducting a genocide.
So we've had
Anna, even if there were 6 terrorists killed in the strike, there were 20 people killed total. So there were a lot of people who were killed who, according to Israel, were not terrorists. 5 of those people were journalists. That's what I'm talking about. I can't litigate the terrorists or not, but even based on their version of it, that is what I think is causing a lot of concern.
Sure. Look, it's a war. Tragic things happen. People that you hope would not be killed get killed, and you have in an active war zone. It happens in every active war zone for all of human history. I would note we've had 4 people talk and told me, and not a single person has said the word hostage yet. There's still 50 hostages.
Right.
Well,
Israel doesn't care about the hostages. Let's not lie about that either.
Just to be clear, I said hostages because I was talking about the hundreds of Israelis who were in the streets today demanding a hostage deal.
I know. And guess what?
Demanding that this war end immediately.
And the deal has to be executed by the people who took the hostages, Hamas. They're the ones holding them. They're the ones who have been holding them since October the 7th. Mm-hmm. They keep, talking about possible incremental. Why don't they just release? Can you answer one simple question?
They want to release the hostages.
All of them?
Yes.
How many?
They accepted a ceasefire.
Lying. They said maybe 10.
Give us a 60-day pause in this war. We will return every single hostage. Israel stands in the way every single
There's no answer to this. Why are they holding the hostages?
What is your view about this? Because this is a talking point that comes up a lot.
It's not a talking point. There are 50 lives down there.
Hold on a second,
It is definitely a talking point. When you block humanitarian into the Gaza Strip for 3 months straight, it not only impacts the Palestinians, which I know you couldn't care less about, but it also obviously is going to impact the hostages. They're going to starve to death as well.
You're saying Israel is starving the hostages?
I'm saying, yes, yeah. When you block humanitarian aid for 3 months, where do you think they're going to get the food from?
Max, Israel
what a joke.
And Hamas have been circling around a lot of different...
And Scott Jennings is just a propagandist. I mean, I don't know if he's being paid directly by Israel, but it certainly seems that way to have these such strong views where, you know, Scott Jennings clearly, as Anna Kasparian says here, Scott Jennings does not care one bit about the Palestinian people. And that's what's incredible about this is just these people on either side. I mean, because there are Democrats who are like this too, where they only care about one set of lives and they don't care about the other set of lives, the other group of lives of innocent children. You know, people that I know who are progressives don't want Israelis to die and they don't want Palestinians to die. Clearly, Scott Jennings only cares about the Israeli lives. He doesn't care about the rest. They're meaningless to him. That's just what happens in war. You know, shit happens. And I'm sure Anna Kasparian probably took everything that she had not to do this, but he flat out just says, you're lying. Scott Jennings says to Anna Kasparian, I don't know how these people who are guests on these shows don't say to Abby Phillip, you know, I'm not going to put up with this. You allow this guy to be on your show every night calling people liars when all he does is spout propaganda?
Hostage deals, ceasefire deals. They haven't happened for a number of different reasons. And with the caveat, as we have said numerous times, Hamas is a homicidal terrorist organization that should never have hostages in the first place. But what is stopping a deal from actually happening to get these last hostages out? Because many Israelis think that the Netanyahu government is not doing enough to take a deal and get them out.
You know, I think that is ultimately the stumbling block, not making any excuses for Hamas, which is this evil, genocidal terrorist organization, but they have indicated a willingness to do a deal to release some of the hostages. There was a deal that was done earlier in the year that released a bunch of hostages. Most Israelis want to do that deal because most Israelis are convinced the only way the 20 remaining hostages who are still alive are going to come home is with a deal. But Netanyahu insists on military action, which most Israelis see as endangering the lives of the hostages. And what Netanyahu is saying, he will keep on fighting until Hamas ceases to exist. Well, Hamas is not going to give up. And so basically, that is consigning Israeli troops to perpetual war in Gaza with no end game in sight. And Netanyahu refuses to make a deal with Hamas. He refuses to allow the Palestinian Authority to come into Gaza to try to have some Palestinian governance, which is more responsible and law-abiding than what they've seen in recent years. So it's a disaster. There's plenty of blame to go around on both sides. But right now, I think there's a general sense in Israel that Netanyahu simply does not want to do the deal.
You said endgame. What is the Hamas endgame? What is their stated goal?
Well, they want to stay. They want to remain as an organization.
No. What's their stated goal as it relates to the Jews in Israel?
They want to destroy the state of Israel. There's no question about it. But they're not in a position to do that anymore because the IDF has rendered them no longer a credible military
What's their stated goal as it relates to Jewish people?
They want to exterminate Jews. But so what, Scott?
I don't think that's it.
That doesn't justify what Israel is doing in Gaza.
I think the point that he's making.
You're acting like we're dealing with rational actors.
No,
we're not. There may not be a deal to be done with rational actors.
Can we talk about Netanyahu's stated goal?
I'm not acting like anything at all. But the question on the table for the entire globe is what is it going to take to, A, bring those hostages home and end the killing and the suffering of the Palestinian people? And at the end of the day, it has to be a deal between Hamas and the Israeli government. And Hamas is a horrible entity, but it has to be a deal with them.
But you're saying you're going to leave them in place.
And there will be a deal with them.
No,
you're saying you're going to leave them in place.
The only way, Scott, the only way...
I'm saying what?
Are you saying that you said we have to have a deal with Hamas? You're anticipating that we leave them in place.
Scott, did I say anything of the sort?
Yes, you just said we have to have a deal with Hamas.
No. I did not say anything of the sort. In order to get the hostages out, Go ask President Trump. He has been trying to broker a deal between Hamas and Israel. None of that is new. None of that is novel. None of that is even a
The only
political
Scott, can I ask
statement.
you a
It's just a
question?
fact.
Why is Israel
Okay.
annexing the West Bank right now? Why is Israel annexing the West Bank? Which, of course, is not governed by Hamas at all. Why are Israeli settlers allowed to just run Palestinians out of their legal homes, build thousands of illegal settlements? West Bank has nothing to do with Hamas. Why is Israel annexing it? Why did Netanyahu say that his stated goal in an interview with I-24 News, an Israeli publication, say that he has a religious need to pursue the greater Israel
I'm going to let
project?
Scott answer quickly, and then we've got to go. Go ahead, Scott.
Go ahead, Scott.
My view is this. The hostages have been there for almost 700 days. There's a reason that Hamas has not
Are you
released
going to answer
them.
her question, though?
I don't
He's
know.
not.
I don't
He's not
work for
gonna
the
answer.
Israeli
Yeah.
government. All I really care about is that the hostages
Okay.
come home. And I have no belief that Hamas, that took the hostages, that murdered all these people, are ever going to let
All
them
right.
go unless they're totally eradicated.
We do have
Except
to leave
they
it
have
there.
let them
Max
go
Boot,
during
thank you
ceasefires.
very much for
So Scott Jennings says that he doesn't work for the Israeli government, but he sure sounds like somebody who works for the Israeli government. The thing that I wish would be asked on one of these shows of a guy like Scott Jennings, I wish Abby Phillip would say to Scott Jennings or Anna Kasparian say to Scott Jennings, what is the end goal here? Do you just wipe everybody out if there's still one Hamas person left, or if there is one hostage left? A friend of mine had a really good analogy, and he said that what Israel is doing is like if somebody robbed a bank and took people hostage within the bank, and then the police, instead of trying to negotiate and get the hostages released and arrested the bank robber, if the police just blew up the bank. You know, I mean, that's essentially what Israel is doing. They're just wiping everyone out for what reason? You know, can Scott Jennings say with a straight face, and I know he can't because he doesn't do anything with a straight face. He's always smirking and mugging and smiling and laughing and all of that. But could Scott Jennings answer a straight question and say, you know, at what point is it enough people have been wiped out? That's what none of these right-wingers, none of these MAGA types ever seem to be able to answer. But let me know what you think about all this. I know a lot of people, they're upset with Anna Kasparian and feel that, you know, she's moved to the right. But to me, in this instance, she's very correct. And I agree with what she's saying and going up against Scott Jennings on Abby Phillip's show. The guy's a creep. But let me know what you think about all of this. Are you on the side of Anna Kasparian or are you on the side of Scott Jennings? Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I am Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.